This is Khan, a true gamer with top-tier skills. Unfortunately, he talks too much, so he gets slapped by monsters before he can use his abilities. Suddenly, he meets a girl named Flona. She comes to find Khan to ask him for a favor. With his love for girls, of course, no guy would refuse. He then sits down to chat with her and lets her know that he is a responsible person, not just in games but in real life too. So she immediately reveals that the favor she wants to ask is in real life. He is excited and happy because he thinks that after nearly 20 years of being single, he can now experience what it's like to have a girlfriend. She hopes he can help her because if he can, she's willing to give up something very important. He then asks her where she wants to meet him, and she says they will meet soon. Suddenly, Khan falls into another world where a swordsman is on a mission to protect a princess who is running away. Two modern tanks are chasing them and deploying soldiers to surround their group. The swordsman and his men stand up to protect the princess, but the enemy commander has already taken care of all his comrades, leaving only him and the princess. He knows the swordsman is the sword Saint Lane, and out of respect, he will let him live on the condition that he hands over the princess. He refused and prepared for a one-on-one duel with him. Unexpectedly, Khan and his chair fall straight onto the head of the enemy commander. Lane quickly takes the princess away, but she wants him to save Khan too. So he turns back, throws a rope, and pulls him along. Khan is then constantly bombarded with questions about who he is, where he came from, and what the light he appeared in was. But he is the one who needs to ask where this is. He hears an unfamiliar name and thinks he might be dreaming. A little girl comes up and punches him to make him realize this is not a dream. He's about to hit back when Lane threatens him because this is Princess Piria. He doesn't believe the princess is this violent little girl because the princess looks more like the girl over there. But that's Maria, the princess's maid, and she's not a girl but a trap. To make sure, Maria lets him feel down there, making him lose all faith in life. He's fallen into a confusing situation and met some strange people. Meanwhile, the blue-haired guy from earlier has returned to report to the commander about the mission's failure due to being hit on the head by a stranger. But he tells it as if he was caught off guard, which is why he lost. So the commander wants to see who could catch the blue-haired guy off guard. During this time, Khan learns that Lane is escorting the princess to a wedding with a neighboring country to form an alliance, and it seems the group attacking them are rebel insurgents. He thinks the princess is older than him, but the little girl is only 8 years old. He thinks this is illegal, but the princess says she's okay. They still want to do something to repay Khan, so he decides to ask them to buy him a pair of shoes. The group then enters a town and goes to a shop to buy shoes for Khan. Since everyone is choosing ridiculous pairs for him, he boldly chooses the most expensive pair in the store, and the pair he gets looks quite rugged. Suddenly, Lane senses someone following them and signals Khan to prepare to run. The group then runs into an alley and ambushes the two followers. The enemy then pours in, forcing Lane and Maria to stand up and deal with them, while Khan stays behind to watch over the princess. The group then follows Lane to the underground sewer and finds their way to the edge of the city. However, this place is strange as there are no guards. Khan doesn't want to waste time, so he runs out to check and calls the group to follow. However, as soon as they come out, the enemy commander appears. He is Eric, and he's stronger than the guy Khan took down earlier. Maria and Lane stand up to face him. He confidently deals with Lane and activates his sword to knock him and Maria down in one strike. Khan is also struck down by his sword. He's disappointed because he thought Khan would be a little stronger. He then approaches the princess, but Khan continues to stand up without giving up. Admiring his perseverance, Eric decides to use a stronger move. But as he stands preparing his move, Khan approaches and kicks him straight in the groin, causing him to pass out and allowing the group to leave. Lane is surprised that he could take down someone as tough as Eric, but Khan finds it normal. He also steals Eric's fancy sword for future use. Princess Piria decides to appoint Khan as her knight from now on, and he's not allowed to refuse because Lane is ready to send him off if he disobeys. But he's determined to refuse at all costs because he doesn't want to be a servant to this little girl. A few days later, Eric wakes up and remembers being kicked in the groin by Khan. The doctor then comes to deliver the bad news that they had to remove one of Eric's testicles. Hearing that he now only has one jewel left makes Eric very bitter, and he swears to take revenge on Khan. Meanwhile, Khan is still grumbling about not wanting to be a servant to this little princess, even if it's an official order. He thinks his task now is to find a way back to his old world, but Lane points out that he doesn't have any clues about that yet, so he might as well go along with their group. However, the princess wants him to serve her and she'll provide for his food and clothing. He still refuses because he has his own self-respect. No one stops Khan from leaving because Lane still wants them to continue to the capital and avoid the rebels by any means possible. Eric has now returned to the ranks, and everyone believes he lost because he was played dirty. But the more he stands listening to his subordinates talk, the paler he gets. He then walks away, leaning to one side, which looks very funny. Back to Khan, he's sitting listening to music when suddenly Maria comes to find him. It's unclear whether to call Maria he or she. Specifically, Maria wants Khan to go with her for a while. Maria asks if Khan feels uncomfortable going with them, and he says he doesn't exactly hate it, he just doesn't like being seen as a servant. He is then led by Maria to the carrier pigeons, but here they are enormously large. Maria wants to call for more help to make it easier to reach the capital. Meanwhile, Eric has gone to meet his superiors, and he knows he must quickly capture the princess and also reclaim the sword from Khan. But he's confident Khan won't know how to use it. Khan and Lane have then started researching how to use this sword. He notices the sword has a trigger and below it is a ball. This is used to absorb and transmit energy. He tried pulling the trigger and swinging the sword, but it's no different from when he normally swings a sword. But Khan knows this stone is very valuable, so he wants to remove it from the sword and sell it. Suddenly, the princess comes to find him and asks him to follow her for a while. They climb a watchtower and the princess shows him that this peaceful scenery is what she's protecting. If she can't participate in the marriage, there's a high risk of war breaking out. Therefore, she's willing to sacrifice her him the H to protect this whole world. So she wants Khan to continue helping protect her. But the problem is that he doesn't have any special powers. The 2 times he saved her were just luck. Suddenly, at this moment, Eric brings an entire tank to attack the city to force Khan to show himself. The blue-haired guy is now also with someone else looking for Khan in the small alleys. Khan has now joined forces with Lane, and they know that if they run away now, this town will be in danger. Suddenly, the group has a bomb dropped right at their feet, so they have to run away and unfortunately end up standing right in front of Eric. He aims the cannon at Khan, but fires off target onto his subordinate on the rooftop. He knows he missed because he's off balance. He fires a second time and misses again, so Lane decides to clear the way for Khan to charge in and fight. He believes Khan will somehow be able to use this sword. He then charges up, dodges bullets, and slashes one of the tank's wheels. Khan has activated the sword in some miraculous way and then charges forward, but the sword suddenly turns into a stone club, causing him to lose balance and fall. He picks it up again and charges forward, swinging the club to destroy Eric's tank. Eric still isn't defeated and steps out to fight him one more round. Khan realizes the way he walks is the consequence of his kick last time, so he stands still and lets him lose balance and miss. Khan decides to cure his balance problem by smashing his other side, causing him to be in pain and pass out on the spot. Eric's subordinates once again decide to retreat and promise Khan they'll meet again. After that, the Khan group also left, and he decided to help the princess's group, but in return, they had to find a way to help he return to him. Old world. She agreed and told he that he needed to go to the capital with her, which was not far from where the Khan group was. A girl had been observing and following the group. She sent her flying squirrel or flying mouse to approach Khan. Khan then wondered if he could return when he reached the capital, but that was a matter of luck. However, that place would surely have some clues. The group then encountered the flying squirrel mouse, and both Lane and Maria found it cute and wanted to keep it as a pet. But Khan firmly refused and argued that they shouldn't disrupt the natural order like that. Wild animals should be left in their natural environment to survive and grow stronger in the wild. He came up with a bunch of reasons to prevent them from adopting it and then chased it away. That night, while Khan was sleeping, the creature found its way to his room. In the morning, he was startled and shouted when he found the squirrel mouse had come to him. Although he tried to shout and chase it away, Maria extended her hand to welcome it and decided to keep it at all costs, regardless of whether Khan agreed or not. He continuously painted the worst scenarios of keeping this creature, but Maria still refused. Lane then told a legend about a hero. The story of how famous that person was contrasted with how nonsensical it seemed to Khan when he heard that the hero liked cats. In short, Lane also agreed to keep the squirrel mouse. With 2 against 1, the princess also sided with the other 2. Khan absolutely disagreed and vowed not to coexist with this animal. He then went out to buy some hunting equipment because he didn't believe that a top server player in the hunter category like he used to be couldn't hunt a small animal. Lane asked what he was planning to do, and he just said he was going hunting for a bit. He then carried a net into the room to find the squirrel mouse, but was confronted by Maria pointing a gun at him, asking what he was planning. He then went to prepare poison to trick the squirrel mouse, but the princess caught him and wanted him to taste it if it wasn't harmful. The princess then had to gather the group and ask why Khan hated this squirrel so much. So he had to confess that he was allergic to pets, but everyone saw that he wasn't affected when he was near the squirrel mouse. Everyone then wanted him to stop making excuses and tell the truth, so he had to tell his story. When he was on a rainy day, he found 2 abandoned cats on the street. He was kind enough to take them home and raise them. However, everyone wondered what tragedy had occurred at this point. Did they get sick and die, or did his family object and not allow him to keep them? No, he hated them because he had raised them so much but never received any affection from them. Everyone thought this might be an opportunity for him to change his perspective. He wasn't sure if he could really change, but he still agreed to listen to the other 3 and extended his hand to make peace with the squirrel. But it immediately bit his hand, making him extremely angry and grabbing a mace to fight with it. He wanted it to disappear if it lost, and if he lost, it still had to disappear. Lane and Maria wanted him not to be so petty and to set proper conditions, so he agreed to let it stay if it won. He then continuously swung his hammer and destroyed the floor. Everyone wanted him not to be too rough, but he didn't listen. He was scratched once by the squirrel lunging at him. He kept attacking but couldn't land a single hit. Just when he had cornered it, he missed again because it jumped up and kicked him in the face, knocking him unconscious. He then lost and had to accept letting it follow the group. He still vowed to kill it if he had the chance. The journey afterward was not very smooth as the squirrel mouse and Khan constantly quarreled with each other. Everyone now thought of one thing: they had to name this squirrel mouse. Everyone came up with silly names, so Khan argued that naming should be done carefully and properly, and above all, it should only be 4 syllables long. If no one could come up with a proper name, he would call it Pet. No one objected much, and they continued on their journey. While Eric was leading the blue-haired person back to his mansion, Eric reunited with his fiancée there, and she was very sorry to hear that Eric had been slandered on the battlefield. If she knew that her fiancé had just lost 2 more gems, who knows how much more sorry she would be. When Eric went into the house, his fiancée, having heard that Eric was wounded, wanted to apply medicine to his wounds. He was afraid that if he revealed now that he had lost the most precious thing, he would lose his fiancée forever, so he decided to hide it at all costs. However, his refusal made her somewhat sad. Later, as Eric was about to leave with the blue-haired person, the butler noticed that Eric's fiancée seemed sad about something. Not wanting to leave his fiancée alone, Eric invited her to join him in the carriage for sightseeing. Sitting in the carriage, Eric constantly thought about what would happen if he told the truth to his fiancée. Surely she would be disappointed and abandon him. While camping by the lake, his fiancée asked Eric how many children he wanted in the future. But hearing this made Eric's heart ache even more because he wondered if he could even have any children in his current condition. Eric didn't want to talk about this, but his fiancée thought Eric meant that children were a gift from heaven and they couldn't decide for themselves. Eric, feeling a pang in his heart, left for a moment to ask heaven how he should answer his fiancée. Noticing Eric's strange behavior, his fiancée asked the blue-haired person where Eric was wounded, but the blue-haired person didn't know either. The blue-haired person also told her the name of the person who had caused Eric's predicament and why Eric was defeated. That evening, upon returning, Eric met 2 acquaintances, Limpus and Ella. Hearing about Eric's injury, Ella gave him a box of traditional medicine that only needed to be taken orally. Eric happily accepted it, which made his fiancée even sadder. The blue-haired person asked the butler about these 2 people and learned that they were distant relatives of Eric. Limpus then told the butler to prepare a feast for dinner that night, but the ultimate purpose of Limpus and Ella was more sinister. Specifically, the medicine given to Eric earlier was a stimulant, and Ella would have the duty of seducing Eric to become his bride and take over the family's reputation, while Limpus would take advantage of this to approach Eric's fiancée and marry her. Later, Ella brought the medicine to Eric and lured him to lie on the bed. She then wore only her underwear and began to wrap herself around Eric, but Eric pushed her away. However, Limpus rushed in and started making a fuss about this. Eric's fiancée ran away in sadness, while Limpus didn't believe any of Eric's excuses, saying that only if that part was weak would it not be affected by the medicine. Hearing this, Eric felt a pang in his heart and decided to challenge Limpus to prove his innocence. Limpus accepted the challenge and arranged to meet Eric in the forest the next day. Limpus had anticipated this, so when leaving, he told his sister the reason he was confident in challenging Eric was because Eric valued honor while he didn't. The blue-haired person overheard this and reported it to Eric. Eric had also suspected this, but still had to fight to find a way to apologize to his fiancée. The next morning, Eric and the blue-haired person met Limpus and his sister in the forest. The blue-haired person blamed this situation on Limpus's setup, but since he admitted to it anyway, Eric had to accept the deal and fight. Eric then wanted to fight Limpus, but Limpus called out a muscular man to fight in his place. Not only that, but the muscular man also called out more accomplices, and so on until Eric had to fight 7 men. However, Eric was not intimidated and charged forward, knocking each one to the ground with a single blow. But Limpus then summoned a demonic chicken to fight Eric. Eric was gradually losing strength and couldn't hold out much longer, but his fiancée and the butler arrived to cheer him on. Empowered, Eric continued fighting, but suddenly the chicken ran towards his fiancée, causing Eric to awaken some kind of power to rush over, intercept, and slash down the chicken. Eric then approached Limpus to ask if he admitted defeat, and Limpus conceded. But as Eric turned away, Limpus kicked him in the groin. However, a person who had lost everything no longer felt pain as he once did. Eric defeated Limpus and approached his fiancée. The butler wondered why Eric didn't feel pain when kicked in the vital spot, to which Eric claimed he had trained for it. The blue-haired person had to admit and called Eric a man of steel. The next day, Eric and the blue-haired person set off to return to their mission. Eric now happily accepted medicine from his fiancée to make her feel better and promised to return someday. Eric and the blue-haired person then headed to a hot spring to cleanse their bodies. The rebel council now hears news that the princess is being protected by a powerful warrior. This warrior is very mysterious and can use energy weapons. They have no information about this person, so they decide to send someone to deal with the situation quietly to avoid Eric finding out. They fear Eric's honor would be damaged if they spoke up. They then went to the prison and released a cannibal to hunt down Khan's group. Back to Khan's group, he now knows the princess's plan is to take he to the capital and find a way to help he fly up to the Sky City, as that place might know something about he falling from the sky. From now until then, do him. Bodyguard job for her well. The cannibal has spotted the group and is following them. They later arrive at an inn and stay there today. Khan asked Lane how long they still have to travel, and he said 2 months if there are no setbacks. Khan complains because it's too long, but he wants he to focus on protecting the princess, as she trusts he very much. Suddenly, Maria runs in to report that the princess has reached that time. Khan doesn't understand but is dragged along to see. Everyone comes to look, but he see the princess looking completely normal. Lane had to pull he outside to prevent he from angering the princess. He wonder about the princess looking completely normal. Then Lane asks if he noticed the tuft of hair on the princess's head. He did notice, but before they could explain in detail, the princess complained of hunger and both quickly ran to the kitchen to find food. Despite Maria taking out all the food in the kitchen, it still wasn't enough. Maria then told the chef that they would rent out the entire place for a day and the inn shouldn't accept any more guests. Maria also asked Lane and Khan to go buy more food. As soon as they left the inn, the cannibal approached. Lane and Khan have now bought food and returned. Lane explains that the princess is in her hyperactive period, and although he has never seen her during this time, he's heard from others that it's terrifying. They need to avoid upsetting her because once the third tuft of hair stands up on her head, everything will be over. When they return, Maria has cooked a lot and asks them to bring it to the princess. As soon as they bring it in, she demands something bigger. Khan places a plate of food down and it disappears instantly, so he has to go back to the kitchen. Maria's hands are numb, but she still has to keep cooking. Khan keeps bringing food up and it keeps disappearing, making him start to grumble. The second tuft of hair stands up and Lane starts to worry. The princess now forces him to say meow after every sentence. Although Lane knows this will make him look like a clown, he doesn't want to risk his life, so he tries his best to meow. She then makes Pet act like a bird, so it starts chirping and trying to fly. Maria has cooked so much that she's going crazy, but Khan now thinks the princess is just growing and eating a bit more, so they don't need to indulge her too much. He decides to handle this himself. He goes to the princess's room and says he understands her current situation, but she shouldn't trouble others. She needs to help the other two, and the first thing is to help him carry these dishes down to the kitchen. Maria and Lane are shocked because the princess actually helps Khan. After she returns to her room, the other two advise Khan not to do such reckless things again if he doesn't want to die. He then wants both of them to go rest and not worry. The lights are out and the cannibal finally acts. He sneaks in and discovers someone in the kitchen. He goes to check and sees Maria still cooking there. He rushes to stab her, but Maria throws a ladle of soup at him, causing the meat skewer to fall on his face. Flour then falls on his head and Maria, angry, goes to beat him up and demands he leave immediately if he values his life. He fearfully runs away and then decides to change his target. He caught Lane's eye and he angrily strode over, demanding that he leave immediately if he didn't want to die. But he thought that warning was just a threat, so he ran away and then reached the princess's room. He knew the princess was in bed, so he approached intending to assassinate her. But the third tuft of hair stood up and the nightmare truly began. Khan was going to the bathroom when suddenly that guy rushed over and clung to him. He begged Khan for help, so Khan thought he was hired by those two to scare him about the princess affair. Khan then followed him to the princess's room to find her, but he didn't see her in bed. He went to the window to check and saw that guy had been frightened unconscious by the princess. She then toyed with Khan and lunged at him. Khan saw the 3 tufts of hair and knew what had happened, so he jumped out the window to escape. The assassination plan had failed, and no one ever saw that assassin again after that. A few days later, the group arrived at a hot spring town. This was the largest hot spring area on the entire continent. Khan didn't seem to like this place much because he came here with kids and men but no girls. He asked Lane about services for men and Lane pointed to the area across the way. Lane then led them to the hotel where he usually stays when visiting here. The staff guided the whole group to their rooms. Khan wondered if Maria would bathe in the men's or women's section, but Lane informed him that Maria and the princess already had bathtubs in their room, while he and Khan would be in this small room and use the outdoor bath. Khan eagerly jumped in, but Lane wanted him to sit still and enjoy it. He felt nostalgic because he had gone to a hot spring with his family once before. As he sat listening to Lane talk, suddenly his thing stood up. Worried that Lane would notice, he asked to leave early. He was concerned his sexuality was bending, so he had to find a way to fix it urgently. But he remembered Lane saying this hot spring also helps awaken him. Suddenly he saw Eric walking by, so he hid in a corner. He couldn't believe the guy he hated most was here, and since he had played dirty tricks on him twice before and made him lose 2 gems, he had a feeling he wouldn't be able to trick him again this time. He then ran back to the princess's room and asked to hide there temporarily, but the two inside were having too much fun to hear anything, so he had to go look for Lane again. But he had left the bath and Khan was sure he had gone to the entertainment area earlier. He then saw Eric coming in, so he had to hide. As soon as Eric entered, Khan noticed he was trying to beg the gods to grant a miracle for his brother to return to normal. It seemed pitiful, but oh well. Khan then ran to the reception desk and asked them to tell the princess and Maria to stay in their room at all costs. He then ran to the adult entertainment area to find Lane, but it was so big now he didn't know where to look. Suddenly he saw some girls dressed as rabbits and realized Lane really likes animals, so he found a shop that he was sure Lane was in. He asked a passerby and learned that inside, customers drink while playing with cats. So he went in and indeed found Lane there. He told Lane what happened and that he just wanted to avoid Eric, not fight him. Suddenly Eric walked by again, forcing Lane to hide him. Khan then noticed his little thing had calmed down, so he realized it stood up because Eric was around. His body then suddenly started glowing, causing everyone to notice him when they returned. When they got back to the hotel, Lane wondered about his glowing, but Khan didn't know either. He just wanted to sleep first and figure it out later, but his body was too bright for Lane to sleep. Khan wanted Lane to just ignore it, but he asked Khan what would happen if he glowed like this forever. Khan worried he wouldn't be able to get a job, couldn't donate blood to help people, and worst of all, wouldn't get a girlfriend. Feeling dejected, he went to take a bath for a while. As soon as he sat in the tub, he saw his body stop glowing, but suddenly Eric was there too. Both of them started causing trouble and demanded to fight each other, because Eric saw that his body was glowing again and his penis was erect as if taunting him. He then wanted a temporary truce, as he didn't want to destroy this place and fight while naked. He thought that if they fought here, the owner of this place would get a bad reputation, and they would be discovered as losers while naked, so he wanted to get dressed before fighting. But just as he put on his clothes, he noticed Eric was vulnerable, so he grabbed a broom and hit him hard on the head, then fled with the whole group. After they set out, Khan was forced to wrap himself in bandages to conceal his identity. He felt this made him more noticeable, and he looked no different from an assassin. They then arrived at a new town, and while everyone was eating, Khan had to sit and watch because everyone was afraid he would be exposed if he opened his mouth to eat, so he would have to hide somewhere before he could eat. When he expressed his request, everyone ignored him, so he started to remove the bandages to eat but was stopped. He was then dragged away by the group, but the villagers blocked them because they wanted to see what was wrong with Khan's body. Everyone said he was severely burned, but they blocked the entrance and pulled off his bandages. He then revealed that he was glowing, so they bowed down and called him a god. The village chief came and said there was once a prophecy that a god would descend to earth and his body would glow, so they considered him to be that god. He confessed that he was a person who fell from the sky and was warmly welcomed by the villagers. He was then fed abundantly and thought that if they told the truth, the villagers might not let them go, so it was better to just go along with it. We now know that his body glowing was due to excess magic power in his body overflowing and radiating outward, creating this phenomenon. The village chief then came and gathered all the villagers, saying they wanted to see his miracles. He made himself glow and a swarm of butterflies suddenly flew around him. Everyone saw him as truly a god and asked him to bring back the village's water source. He told Lane to give him the sword, then transformed it into a hammer and struck the village well. The underground water source below gushed up and helped the villagers out of their misery. The princess thought he was just lucky and wanted him not to go too far with this, or the consequences would be unpredictable. Lane planned to leave early while they still could, but the village chief asked him what happened in the early days of the world. He started spouting nonsense, so the princess's group had to explain to the villagers for him. They gave the villagers the answers they wanted to hear, and ended up having to stay for another day. The next day, the villagers came again to ask God Khan about knowledge of the world, where it began, and whether the world would come to knowledge. He explained a bunch of nonsense again, and the princess had to correct it. Some people stood up to argue, but were ordered by Khan to bow down, saying that foolish humans dare to argue with a god. In the following days, Khan was given a large shrine by the villagers, countless treasures, and was surrounded by many beautiful maids. He wanted to enjoy it more, but the princess's group thought he should leave now if he didn't want to be exposed. He thought he couldn't be exposed because he was still glowing, so people would believe whatever he said. But the villagers had started to riot and demanded to see Khan every day. He had to appear to calm them down for a while, then went inside to start wrapping himself up to escape. He was then discovered by the village chief. He said he had to go to other places to preach, but the village chief needed him to continue teaching the chaotic people below, or else they would go to war with other cults to expand Khan's faith more strongly. He asked to stop that and decided to go out and call on the people to expand their faith by building a tower on that mountain. At least this would buy him more time and utilize their labor for something. Lane decided to design the tower for the villagers because he was the valedictorian of the engineering design school in the army. Several days later, the tower was completed and Khan stood glowing before the people. But Lane wanted him to glow more. He exerted more power and made the hot air balloon that Lane had secretly made fly up. Khan used the excuse that they would return to heaven to deceive the people. Seeing this, the village chief reassured the people that Khan would return to heaven and their task was to continue spreading Khan's faith throughout the world. Khan then left with the whole group, and his body suddenly stopped glowing, causing the group to panic because without his glow, they also lost the energy to fly. The balloon nearly fell, forcing everyone to tell Khan to try hard to glow, but he gave up because he couldn't produce any more energy. After a few days, we meet Eric again. Eric was standing in the breeze when he unexpectedly met the girl who had been following Khan's group all along. Eric knew this girl. She was from the Sky City, and her name was Alma. Blue Hair suddenly ran up to report that Eric would soon be able to return to the army once more. Blonde thought he would be able to stay close as Eric's advisor, but everyone objected because they all saw themselves as Eric's most trusted confidant. That night, Pet went around the inn and saw everyone sound asleep, so he decided to go out and report. Eric's 4 confidants were out drinking at this time. While drinking, Red Hair and Black Hair found reasons to badmouth each other, and were about to fight when Blonde told them both not to misbehave and bring disgrace to Eric. All 4 then decided to state the reasons why they considered themselves most worthy to serve Eric. Black Hair stood up to speak first, saying that during Eric's rest period, he had gone to the mountains to train and underwent many harsh training sessions to surpass his limits. But everyone thought Black Hair trained those things due to his masochistic nature. More importantly, Black Hair had just invented a killing technique, and its name was so ridiculously long that no one could hear it. Meanwhile, Eric had followed Alma to meet a blacksmith. This blacksmith had made an order according to Alma's request, which was to create a sword for Eric, and this sword could be called a holy sword. Back to the drinking party, Red Hair revealed that he had just forged an unyielding will. Specifically, on a mission, or more accurately a night of revelry, Red Hair claimed that he and 2 comrades had entered the enemy's lair, which was actually a tavern. Red Hair thought the enemy had almost caught on to his plan, putting him and his comrades in a difficult situation, specifically that the girls kept avoiding the groping of the 3 MG men. In the end, Red Hair claimed that his comrades had fallen and he himself was determined that he couldn't escape. The situation was that the other 2 had passed out drunk while Red Hair didn't have enough money to pay. So Red Hair had spent a night with a tavern owner to escape the difficult situation. Hearing this, Blonde knew Red Hair was referring to the night at the bar because Blonde also knew about that incident. It must be because of that promiscuous nature that Red Hair's wife left him. Back to Eric, Alma had placed a gem in the sword and transmitted energy into it, while warning Eric not to lose it again. Eric promised and vowed to wash away the shame of the past. Back to Blonde's story. The reason he said he was suitable to be by Eric's side was because Eric needed love, not a powerful attendant. Everyone noticed that whenever Blonde was drunk, he talked just like a girl, and no one knew that Blonde was actually a girl disguised as a boy. Everyone who heard Blonde's imagination about a morning with Eric punched him to wake him up from his delusion because Eric already had a fiancé, but Blonde didn't care. Red Hair thought that it was because of those who liked to be the third wheel like Blonde that this world was in chaos. Blonde thought Red Hair was blaming him for his wife leaving him, so the two started arguing again. Blue Hair wanted Black Hair to intervene, but Black Hair had fallen asleep. Blonde and Red Hair stood up to prepare for a fight. Black Hair now also jumped up, wanting to participate to see who was the strongest to be Eric's attendant. Blue Hair agreed to the fight, but the rules would be set by Blue Hair. After that, all four went to the desert to hunt a dragon. It didn't matter who dealt the most damage, as long as someone could deliver the finishing blow, they would win. Black Hair charged forward and unleashed his ultimate killing technique. Red Hair took advantage of the opportunity to circle behind and cut off its tail. Blonde rushed up to slash at its head, and Blue Hair leaped up to break its horns. But it ran away and called for its big brother. This larger dragon was much stronger and defeated all four of them. But at that moment, Eric arrived and used his new sword to destroy the dragon in one strike. Eric confessed to everyone that he was wrong to try to confront Khan alone. From now on, Eric wanted everyone's help to defeat Khan. Back to Khan's group, in the following days, they ran out of food and had to catch fish to grill and eat to get by. Khan now began to complain about how comfortable his life was in the old world, and now he had to eat and sleep rough like a homeless person. They told him to hang on because they would reach town tomorrow, but he missed home and everything he had back there. That night, when everyone was asleep, Khan lay reminiscing about his homeland. The next morning, the group reached the next town and everyone noticed Khan was unusually quiet today, and he had been carving something since morning. We later learned that he had tried to make a wooden game controller to comfort himself. When they entered the town, everyone went to take a bath to relax. But when Lane returned to the room, he saw Khan sitting and pressing the piece of wood he had made that morning, while mumbling nonsense about wanting to eat snacks and read manga. Lane told the princess and Maria, but they didn't know what snacks were. From the description, it was supposedly something with many strange, diverse flavors and thinly sliced. Not understanding, they went shopping and brought back things for Khan to try. He was now like someone with mental issues, looking at the rectangle on the wall as if it were a TV. Everyone understood he was homesick, so they decided to make something for Khan to eat. Maria came to ask and Khan requested a hamburger. Not knowing exactly what it was, Maria asked him to write down the ingredients. Although it still sounded strange, Maria would try to make it. Although they knew it would cost quite a bit of money, the princess decided to indulge Khan for one day. They went to the market and the princess soon came to call Khan down to try the food. When he came down, Maria had somehow managed to create Coca-Cola and hamburgers for him. The familiar taste delighted him and he asked for more. But when he went into the kitchen to see how Maria made it, he saw the place looked like a laboratory combined with a witch's potion room, and there were monsters flying all around. Too scared, Khan retreated to his room to play imaginary games again. Maria then thought the problem might not be in the taste. But now they thought about the second thing Khan mentioned, which was manga. Based on Lane's description, Maria had something to give Khan. He received it, opened it to look, and then had a nosebleed when he saw it was an adult magazine. He then used a blanket to cover his eyes and continued playing games, causing everyone to be confused about what Khan needed. Lane was too tired of this, so he decided to take Khan out for a trip. Lane then took him to a casino, but what they played was not upstairs but downstairs. Lane led him to an underground arena where he could bet on the fighter he believed would win. Currently, this masked fighter was the candidate for the championship. He then led Khan to the betting ticket booth, but only Lane placed a bet, not allowing Khan to bet. While sitting in the waiting room, Khan kept asking why he couldn't place a bet. Just a few minutes later, the fighters for the next match were called to the arena, and Khan was among them. He was brought to the arena with 3 other muscular men. The candidate for the championship heard that the finalist had arrived, and that person was Khan. He defeated the other 3 by running around making them hit each other, then rushing out to kick the last one standing in the groin. The manager of the championship candidate saw that Khan was not to be underestimated. He then shook hands with Lane to enjoy the most wonderful match together. Khan then went up to the arena and saw the opponent carrying a chainsaw. He complained, but the other side said that since he also had a sword, this was fair. So he had to run for his life because getting hit by the saw would certainly mean death. Lane wanted him to fight like he did with Eric, but he said the two were vastly different. He then found himself cornered and pulled out his mace to knock away the chainsaw. But afterwards he gave up and fled the arena, angering all the spectators. When they returned, Khan said that all three of them were trying to use him to make money. He was just homesick and feeling sorry for himself to get a little more attention from them, but they dragged him out to profit. A few days later, the group passed by an abandoned castle and decided to stay there for the night. The next morning, when they set out, Khan kept complaining about back pain from sleeping in that abandoned castle. Suddenly, a cannonball was fired at them, and Lane managed to get the group to dodge it. Eric saw that the shot had missed, but at least it was a good opening move. Eric's troops then charged forward and Lane and Khan stood to stop them. Eric then arrived and dueled with Khan, but the explosion from their weapons clashing caused an explosion that made Khan's entire group fall down a cliff. Lane jumped down after the group and Khan soon regained consciousness. The princess and Lane were safe, and they also discovered that Black Hair had fallen down here with them. On Eric's side, they had captured Maria and brought her back to camp for interrogation. Maria kept acting like an idiot and boy crazy to make Eric's side complacent, buying time for Khan's side to act. Khan's side had tied up Black Hair, and he wouldn't reveal anything, so the princess went to step on him a few times, but Khan stopped her because this method wouldn't work on a masochist. Maria was now being interrogated, but kept showing her boy crazy and silly nature to prevent Eric's side from forcing any information out of her. Black Hair also decided to keep his mouth shut at all costs, but when Khan started chatting and asking if anyone besides Eric was stronger than him, he said he only lost to Eric while the other three had weaknesses. One was weak to women, one was an alcoholic, and the other was too himgy and naive. So suddenly Khan learned the weaknesses of the other three. He just regretted not being able to trick him into giving information about the cannon. Khan then came up with a way to deal with Eric's side, as they might be holding Maria. Eric's patrol team then returned and reported that they had found Black Hair tied up in the forest with a note stuck to his back. Eric read it and knew Khan had arranged to meet once to settle everything. Eric then released Maria as a gesture of goodwill, and Maria noticed that Eric was very similar to herself. Maria looked down and Eric was startled and told her to leave quickly. Maria then returned to that abandoned castle and reunited with Khan's group. He told Maria to help prepare because he needed to welcome Eric's group. Eric and his people then arrived at the castle and decided to charge in. Khan had drawn arrows for guidance and Eric followed them to a room with an exercise chair. Black Hair excitedly ran over to try it, triggering a trap that crushed his foot. Going a bit further, there was a magazine in front of them. Everyone knew it was a trap, but Red Hair stepped forward and although still tempted, he grabbed it and stepped back, thinking he had escaped, but then an iron basin fell on his head. In the next room was a pile of alcohol, but Red Hair was very sober when he shot and broke everything so Blonde wouldn't fall for it. Eric's people kept falling for traps in the castle. Eric and his 4 attendants then reached the final room and were doused with a bunch of lubricant by Khan. He kept taunting Eric and then made the whole group fall down. Eric now wanted Khan to come out and face him properly. He obliged and came out, threatening Eric that if he took one more step everything would explode. But Eric used his sword and launched a strike from afar to destroy both the princess and Khan. Everyone then thought Khan and the princess were dead, so they turned to leave. Pet then woke up in the rubble and truly thought both of them were really dead. In the following days, Eric's people also carefully monitored Maria and Lane to see if they had any unusual movements. Red Hair and Blonde saw them go to an inn and stay there. The reason Eric's side was still suspicious was because Khan was originally very cunning, but now he died so easily, which was not right at all. Blonde was originally following to ensure Red Hair didn't secretly neglect his duty to go play with the girls here. That night, they both observed that Maria and Lane had no suspicious movements. The next morning, Lane and Maria were still in the room, and Blonde and Red Hair kept arguing about Red Hair wanting to play while on duty, but of course Blonde wouldn't agree. They then saw Lane and Maria go out, so they followed. As they followed, they saw the two separate, so each person followed one target. Red Hair followed Lane and noticed he seemed to still know nothing. Lane then went to a cafe and met a man there. Lane gave money to this person and then they went their separate ways. Red Hair decided to follow this new man up the mountain. Due to the thick fog, Red Hair soon lost sight of that man, but when following the direction the man went, Red Hair discovered a cemetery. When he returned, Blonde reported that both had returned to the inn, and when he heard that Red Hair had lost his target, Blonde mocked him as pathetic. Black hair and blue hair now felt a bit bored because they had lost an enemy to motivate them to fight. Everyone thought Eric would feel the same, but when Eric entered the tent, he burst out laughing. It was the third day Red Hair and Blonde were monitoring Lane and Maria. All day long, Lane and Maria did almost nothing but stay in the inn, making Blonde and Red Hair feel bored. At night, Red Hair suggested going out to investigate about the man he had lost earlier. At first, it seemed like he was really going to gather information, but then he reverted to his old ways and went into a bar, having fun with a girl until he was dead drunk at the bar all night without returning. On the fourth day, Red Hair was punched by Blonde and confined to the room until the end of the monitoring mission. That whole day, there was still no movement, until that evening, Red Hair saw Maria go out, so he immediately followed. He followed Maria to a bar and thought this would be the place to meet Khan and the princess again. But Maria came here simply to drink to drown her sorrows. Red Hair, sitting behind, also had to order drinks continuously. Both he and Maria kept drinking until Red Hair was drunk first, but Maria still showed no signs of being drunk. Unable to bear it, Red Hair voluntarily came to sit with Maria and said straightforwardly that he had no intention of fighting, so Maria didn't need to draw her gun. Maria said she had lost and couldn't fulfill an important mission, so now the only way was to drink to forget. Even if they monitored for however long, Maria's side had known from the beginning. However, even if they monitored, it was for nothing because now Maria and Lane could only do what they could. Maria then left and punched Red Hair once as payback for them killing the princess and Khan. The next morning, Red Hair told Blonde to pack up and return because Maria's words seemed true. But then suddenly Red Hair remembered that Maria had known they were monitoring them from the beginning, so he turned to check and found Lane and Maria had left. They both hurriedly went to check, and then Red Hair remembered the cemetery from before, so he dragged Blonde to see. But when they got there, they only saw Lane and Maria holding a funeral for 2 coffins. Therefore, Blonde and Red Hair thought Khan and the princess were really dead, so they decided to end the mission and return. After that day, Maria and Lane had left, and indeed Khan and the princess were still not dead. We then meet a girl named Miranda. She is a cheerful, lively person and a bit hyperactive. She came to complain to her parents that her hair looked a bit bad today, and she was afraid others would see her as ugly. But her parents comforted her, so she decided to visit her grandmother. Although her parents didn't think this was a good idea, she still decided to visit her grandmother. Her mother was about to say something when her father stopped her. When Miranda went out, she was shunned by the villagers, and she seemed unaware of this. Khan was now sitting smugly about his perfect plan to fake his death. The truth was that earlier, they had used the large mirror in that castle to reflect and deceive Eric's group. Moreover, the acting talents of Lane and Maria, along with that fake funeral, were the finishing touch. Having shaken off Eric's group, they could now be confident that they wouldn't be bothered anymore. Khan then suddenly had severe stomach pain, making him not understand what was wrong with him, as he hadn't eaten anything strange and didn't feel the need to go to the bathroom. As for Miranda, she had gone to her grandmother's house and made her grandmother choke on a cake. She took the opportunity to clean the house so her grandmother wouldn't be invaded by bacteria. Her grandmother tried to reach for the glass of water beside her, but was hit by Miranda's broom and fell unconscious. She then went outside and accidentally bumped into Khan's group. Cupid's arrow struck Miranda and gave her a dreamy view of Khan. She thought they were meant for each other, and when she heard that he was having stomach pain, she saw it as a terminal illness and thought this love story was tragic as Khan was about to leave this world. She didn't accept this, so she followed Khan. Khan was now being guided to see a doctor when Miranda followed and started imagining as if she and Khan had had a beautiful love story for a long time and now was the time to part. So she believed a slap would help Khan wake up. She rushed over, punched Khan's face repeatedly, and then ran away believing he would no longer be negative about life. Khan then returned to complain to the group about being beaten. Everyone thought he must have done something to someone to be beaten, but he hadn't done anything at all. So after that, Maria had to go with him to the doctor, and Miranda immediately identified Maria as her love rival. Moreover, she saw Khan as a cunning man who deceived her feelings, so she wielded a great sword and rushed to attack Khan. He luckily dodged, but she fell, so he reached out to catch her. But she then saw Maria's wardrobe malfunction, so she called Khan a scoundrel and ran away. He then got to see the doctor and learned he only had mild food poisoning. He then left and was questioned by Maria about the girl from earlier, but he really knew nothing. On the way back, Miranda once again thought she had been hasty in attacking Khan and saw his promiscuity as a way for her to give up on him and find new happiness. So she once again came to attack Khan. She wanted Khan to express himself to her, but he didn't even understand what she was referring to. She then turned her back to wait for him to express himself, but he ran away. She threw a knife into his shoe sole to prevent him from escaping and declared a challenge to him. They then went to a grass field to duel under the witness of Lane's group. Miranda then opened first and rushed forward. While fighting, she claimed that she and Khan had known each other before and even had a beautiful love story, and now she was ready to restart that love story. The princess, hearing this again, began to suspect Khan, although he tried to explain that he didn't know this girl at all. He was then overwhelmed by Miranda and had to bow his head in defeat. She thought a weakling like him wasn't worthy to be her lover, so she gave up. Back to Khan's group, Lane was now going to rent a boat to get to the next place, but was overcharged, so he refused to rent and angrily returned. When he returned to the group, Khan wondered why Lane was so stingy when he had enough money to rent the whole boat. But he only agreed to go when he wasn't overcharged. So then everyone thought they should just go around instead of going quickly by sea. Khan didn't agree because he wanted to know the fastest way back possible, but between going around and going by sea, it was only a difference of 3 days, so everyone advised him to just go around with them, because on the road they might encounter many interesting things. They then split up to buy things and agreed to meet back here in an hour. Khan split up to find a toilet because he needed to relieve himself. Suddenly, he met one of Eric's subordinates, but because he was drunk, he thought he was seeing Khan wrong. As for Khan, after a while he heard someone's voice. He followed the sound and went to check, then discovered Pet reporting back to someone. Pet just put away the communication device and turned around to see Khan standing behind him. Pet pretends to know nothing, but he are very certain about what he have seen. He shake it too hard, causing it to suddenly faint and then vomit on him. Face. After that, he go to wash him. Face and the green-haired person and another person under Eric's command see him, but they still think he might just be an illusion. He then distinctly hear the pet's voice, blaming he for making it vomit like that. He then force it to reveal what it really is, but it considers he just a kid and thinks he can't do anything to it. He then decide to make it experience some BDSM activities, causing it to surrender. It then gives he a riddle to solve himself. After he solve it, the meaning of the sentence says that the pet is him. Father. It also claims this, but obviously he won't accept it because he and it are different species. So it makes up a story that when he were born, it held a big party. But a dark witch got angry because she wasn't invited to the party, so she cursed him. The pet claims it stood up to protect him, which is why it turned into this form. He don't believe this because it sounds like a fairy tale, but it continues the story, saying that as he grew up, he looked like a Hinji lady. Once while playing ball, he dropped the ball into a lake. A talking frog came and offered to help he and wanted to be friends. That night, the frog came back and wanted he to kiss it, but he already knew the ending of the story, so the pet pretends to be old and senile. He still don't believe it, so he threatened to turn it into tomato sauce if it keeps bragging. Having no choice, it finally tells he directly that he are the chosen one, and it was given the responsibility to follow, watch over, and give he advice when needed. He still don't believe what it says. A while later, another member under Eric's command is reading a romantic novel when he suddenly sees Lane, and he's sitting in a horse carriage, but he thinks he's just seeing things. At this point, he keeps talking about how the pet can speak human language, but in front of everyone, it still acts and makes everyone think him heavily delusional and need to be taken to the capital soon to cure him illness. He know him being seen as a fool, and the pet keeps provoking he to make he look even crazier in front of everyone. Knowing he can't argue back, he decide to play a trick on the pet. He admit that he were wrong for trying to prove the pet could speak human language and won't mention it again. But now he say that Himza noticed the pet has been acting strange lately. He suggests helping the pet find a baby squirrel by finding it a mate. He press the pet's face against the glass window and make it choose between a sheep or a cat, but thinking him gone too far, he bring out a hairless mouse as another option for the pet. The pet runs to the princess's head and says him, being creepy, but he suggests that the pet might be sick because it's mating season and it's not looking for a mate, so he propose neutering it to cure its illness. He bring a sword and tell the pet to bear with it because he only need one strike. The pet tries to run away and keeps shouting, and now the princess realizes that the pet has been speaking human language all along. He now stubbornly refuses to believe and insists on neutering the pet. Eric passes by and catches he trying to neuter the pet, startled because he thought he were dead, but decides to pretend to be deaf and act like he didn't hear anything. Not long after, group arrives at a mobile castle. This castle uses magic, so it can move directly to the capital. Meanwhile, the current ruler has met someone who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is also the person who will marry the princess. The minister hears about the princess being assassinated, but the king believes his granddaughter is still alive because she has great fortune. He then turns and leaves, and we can see that he has quite inconsistent memory, sometimes remembering and sometimes forgetting. The minister, hearing that the princess is still alive, decides to send someone to investigate and punish the rebels if it's true that the princess is still alive. Khan group then arrives at the royal capital, and they will have to climb the tower for a while longer to meet the king. However, this process is quite fast because there is an elevator that transports the royal family up there. As they enter the hall, everyone sees a group of old people there. These are nobles related to the princess, and they look as if they're eager to seize the throne. Upon meeting the king again, the princess steps up for an audience, and indeed he is a person who forgets quickly, forgetting things as soon as he says them. If it weren't for the courtier beside him reminding him, he would barely remember anything. The princess then receives a mask or crown of some sort to use in the wedding ceremony. As for him, he must go to see the astrologer in the west to find the way back to the Sky City. He then hears the king talking about he having some kind of destiny, but before he can explain clearly, he leaves due to soiling his pants. He then retreats with the princess's group, and the princess now has to go to her fiancé house. Therefore, he will have to find him, own way to the western tower. Unfortunately, there are dozens of towers in the west, so he have to borrow a map to go by himself. He say that if he find a way, him will leave immediately without saying goodbye to them, but they are prepared for this as they can no longer rely on him. He then try to find him, weigh on him, own and indeed get lost. He luckily meet the pet again, and it informs he that this is the dark area where criminals do business, so it came down here to close some deals. He admit that he have treated it poorly many times and ask for its help to find a way out of here. He then follow the pet's instructions, moving from one place to another. While walking in a small tunnel, he discover a rebel organization, so the pet takes out masks for both of he to wear to avoid being recognized. However, he are soon discovered by the leader of these rebels. The leader tells he about his goals and sees he knowledge of the reason as an excuse to eliminate him. He run away and encounter another group of rebels, but these are animal lovers. The leader also discovers him, tells he about their ideals, and sees it as a reason to eliminate him. He run again and meet another rebel organization, but this one is for transgender people. He again hear their ideals and then are chased. He managed to run outside, where the leaders of the three factions have gathered and decided to fight each other for the right to rule the kingdom autonomously. He take the opportunity to escape, and more leaders of rebel organizations come out to fight each other. He and the pet finally reach the astrologer's tower. When he arrive, he meet the astrologer, but he doesn't know how to get to the Sky City. Suddenly, a voice rings out telling he to go to the princess's fiancé house, where he will find a way to get to the Sky City. He don't like this roundabout way, so he run there, but the figure has disappeared, and above is indeed the Sky City. The next morning, he returned to find the princess, and she thinks him come to say goodbye. But he say he want to continue going with the group. Lane and Maria return at this time, and another person is sent to support the group on their upcoming journey. The three characters gathered here all seem familiar. Well, the viewers recognize them, but the characters in the movie don't. The group then follows the mustached man to the minister's airship to go to his territory. The rebel organizations, hearing that the princess is still alive, know they must carry out their plan soon and attack the country from many sides and in many areas, as they have now fully prepared for the plan. Eric, now knowing that he are still alive, calls for people to come to the capital to settle the score for the previous deception. He are now sitting in a corner, pondering. He realized that once they reach their destination, their journey will end, and they will have no reason to stay together anymore. But he still worry about the princess because it seems she doesn't like this marriage. However, Lane doesn't care because their job is to escort the princess to a safe place. He wonder where the princess is, and Lane tells he that she is learning wedding etiquette from Maria. Meanwhile, the green-haired person has infiltrated the palace because earlier, Eric was suspended and not allowed to march here. Although Eric was suspended, the green-haired person doesn't want to sit idle. He wants to deal with the princess himself before the superiors act. At this time, the princess was constantly hearing Maria praise the minister, which was quite annoying because she felt everyone was behaving the same way. Meanwhile, Greenhair had found Khan's room and began to see him doing things that looked like a fool, specifically jumping on the mattress wearing only shorts, then sitting with his butt facing the window and watering the dragon circle below. He had rushed in to stop these actions but still remembered to wear a mask to hide his identity. Khan had asked about the princess's future husband, but Greenhair had never met that person before, so he didn't know. Khan really wanted to intervene in this marriage. He then realized the Him-G man in front of him was quite familiar, but he was shot down by Green Hair with a bullet. Green Hair then left, while the minister heard news that there was an intruder on the ship. The minister knew the intruder was someone from Eric's side, and was certain they came up here to assassinate the princess, so he decided to ignore it. Green Hair then passed by and saw Lane playing with an imaginary cat, so he ran in. Lane now also asked Green Hair about how the minister usually treats servants, because he was starting to worry about this marriage of the princess. But just as Lane thought Green Hair looked familiar, his fate was the same as Khan's when he took a bullet. Green Hair then walked past Maria and called her to stop and talk. Maria started saying a bunch of things that Green Hair couldn't understand, and when Maria thought this mask looked familiar, she immediately took a bullet too. Pet couldn't escape that fate either. When stepping into the princess's place, she recognized Green Hair, and he also immediately informed her that her bodyguards had all been dealt with by him. Green Hair saw that the princess was so noble that she was willing to sacrifice herself to save the world, but she felt uncomfortable and threatened to deal with him. Khan had now regained consciousness. He luckily survived thanks to the pile of magazines hidden in his shirt. Running to Lane's room, he was still alive thanks to the coin in his body. Both ran out and met Maria, who was only shot in the mouth pad, while Pet was hit with a few medals. All four then ran to find the princess and saw her unconscious on the bed, but it turned out the princess was just sleeping. Afterwards, everyone didn't understand how the princess still escaped danger, but she just thought that Green Hair had read a few things, so he automatically left. Previously, Green Hair learned that the princess did these things because she believed her own happiness compared to the happiness of all people was too cheap a price, and if she were assassinated now, there would still be many others to replace her, so she wasn't worried about anything. So Green Hair gave up, because Green Hair likes torture, so he doesn't like making victims happy. Khan still didn't quite understand the reason Green Hair left, so he wanted the princess to answer, but she just looked out the window and saw Green Hair mention that her current life was owed to him and he would come to collect later. At the end of that day, they had also arrived at the minister's castle and Khan's journey had also ended early. However, from now until the wedding ceremony there is still a month left, so the princess will still order Khan from now until then. They then entered the minister's castle and met his head butler here. The butler had arranged and assigned rooms for them. Khan had asked where the minister was because he had something to ask him, but the butler informed that the families of both sides were not allowed to meet until they had finished learning all the rituals. Khan had asked about how to get to the Sky City and learned that there was a place in this area researching how to get there. But this information was top secret that the butler was not allowed to disclose. But without him saying it, Pet had already bought the information and knew the location of that place. Pet then led him to the research institute here and he needed a permit to enter. But he didn't go in, he crawled in. He then met a receptionist and she asked what he needed. He said he was a warrior and wanted to go to heaven. Then the girl immediately sounded an alarm and had him arrested. He was then thrown into a room and met someone who could give him the solution, as long as he could prove he was a magic warrior. He took out his sword and began to transform it, so the wall in front of him opened up. In front of him was a kid who was actually the owner of this place. He didn't believe this was the person in charge, so he shouted for the real person to show themselves. But after hearing the theory from this kid, he began to suspect this might actually be the person in charge. However, to get information, he had to exchange it by becoming an experimental subject for the kid. The kid then placed some pieces on Khan's body and started bringing in two girls. The kid wanted to see if warriors like Khan had the same reactions as normal people, which indeed he did. He was then taken to experiment 2 at the swimming pool. He was lowered into the pool and the two girls came again, tied his hands to a rock and pushed him to drown. When realizing that he could drown like normal people, Khan went back on his word and demanded information from the kid in return. The kid allowed Khan to ask 2 questions, and he asked how to get to heaven, but the kid couldn't answer. He asked about the spaceship outside, but that wasn't powerful enough to reach the Sky City. After 2 questions without getting any useful information, Khan was very frustrated. As for the princess, she didn't know when Khan would find the answer, but feared it would take quite a long time for him to return. Khan continued to be an experimental subject. After a series of grueling experiments, he was allowed to ask 4 more questions. He asked about information on the Sky City and learned that the place seemed to operate and fly thanks to magic, so it must have been created by humans, not gods. However, each place had a different record of that city, so nothing was certain. He then asked a few other random questions, but was again tricked by the kid researcher, so he couldn't ask anything useful. He then had to continue doing experiments to test his information and imagination. All showed that he was just an ordinary person with nothing too special. but he was allowed to ask 2 more questions, and he wanted to know what national secret about the Sky City. It was known that someone had once made a passage from the ground to the Sky City. However, that passage had been hidden and currently no one knew its location. Khan asked if he knew him, but he didn't. So Khan decided to leave because he had nothing left to ask. But the kid rushed over and started using the cute eyes of a little brother to beg Khan to stay. He hesitated for a while only to be tied up by the kid's people. He was then taken to the operating table because the kid believed magic warriors like him had some part different from humans, and because there were no X-ray machines at this time, he was determined to be dissected. But Pet cut off the electricity and came to rescue him. They were then surrounded by soldiers, but Khan smashed the wall to escape. The research boy still called him to come back, but he would only come again in his dreams. Meanwhile, Green Hair had just returned to find the other 3 self-harming to punish themselves for getting Eric suspended. One was hanging himself, one was preventing himself from going out with girls, and one was eating spicy food instead of drinking alcohol. Eric was now bored of sitting idle, so he decided to act independently from now on and asked Green Hair to tell the other 3 to stop. Khan now had to follow the princess to attend a lesson on 18 wedding rituals, and the name of the Sky City appeared in the final ritual, making Khan ask him what that ritual was. He didn't answer but said Khan had to study until then to know. He didn't understand why he had to study together, then learned that servants could also help the princess perform rituals faster. First was chopping trees. Lane chopped in 1 stroke and let Maria trim, and Khan's job was to bring this wooden plank down the mountain. He then had to surf on the stream with this log. He fell straight down the waterfall and could barely do anything. When crawling ashore, he wondered if this was a ritual the princess had to perform, why he, as an unrelated person, had to participate in this. The butler believed this was a ritual, and ritual is defined as an ancient action passed down for future generations to follow, and when he asked why he had to do it, it was simply because it was a ritual. Khan then had to arrange a row of dominoes and told us about the previous rituals. After the first ritual, he had to carve the wood into 2 swans. He couldn't argue with this custom, so he gritted his teeth and did it, only to fail. He then had to dance next to a bonfire, and by morning he was dizzy and unconscious. Lane's group had to collect ashes for Khan to later use to draw a picture exactly like the one on this paper. After spending time with his face down on the ground drawing, he began to hallucinate about the universe, only for his work to be destroyed to his regret. And now came this domino arrangement. He had set up countless dominoes, becoming depressed and running away to let out a loud scream. He met Maria again, and she informed him that he needed to set up 4.5 million blocks to be sufficient. But he felt it was more than enough and wouldn't follow these customs anymore. Maria then rambled about being jealous of the princess for being able to experience a wedding, something Maria might never feel in her lifetime. From afar, Eric's group had begun observing Khan and didn't know if he was aware they were watching him yet. Khan's side might not know, or they might know but were pretending not to in order to lure Eric into acting first, as they had been present to sabotage him in recent rituals. In the first ritual of riding the log, Red Hair had planned to have a seductive girl stand out to distract Khan and make him fall off the log, but due to the lack of females, the males had to show up to distract Khan, but he went too fast to notice anything. In the swan carving part, these dirty himji men wore swan dresses for Khan to glimpse and carve incorrectly, but this plan also failed. At the campfire, all 5 people sat behind the fire to chat and forgot their mission. In the morning when Khan was drawing with ashes, Eric got irritated seeing him do it so poorly and had to go out to fix it. Although Khan recognized Eric, he still decided to let Eric help, and they would have a chance to confront each other later. When Eric returned, everyone blamed him, asking what he gained from doing that. And now, in this domino setting round, Eric planned to sabotage again by buying all the dominoes on the market. But when he went to the market, he found out the price of dominoes was skyrocketing because the minister's side had ordered them all. And the whole group only had a few coins, as they had separated to work independently, so the superiors no longer provided funding. They planned to ask Eric's family for sponsorship, but Eric also didn't have a penny. Suddenly, they met an old man selling dominoes, but the group didn't have much money, so Maria spoke up to buy all the old man's dominoes. The 2 sides then fought over the poor vendors, so Khan rushed in to intervene, but then he also got involved in pulling the man. They pulled too hard until something red splattered out. Maria then tripped and fell on Eric. Both rolled several times and accidentally touched each other's important parts, and thanks to this accident, many things would happen later. The red substance earlier was just the old man's wine bottle. Not long after, the 14th ritual of the princess dropping eye drops from above was also completed. But as soon as there was time to take a break, the princess's first hair strand stood up. Khan panicked, but Lane covered his mouth to prevent him from saying nonsense. They then invited each other to go sing karaoke, and Khan didn't think this world was modern enough to have this stuff. But he was mistaken when what was in front of him wasn't a TV, but a dwarf sitting inside playing instruments. The princess started to feel uncomfortable and was about to grow a second strand when Maria had to hurriedly order food and ask what the princess liked. Maria could no longer maintain her feminine voice and growled, pressuring the waiter to bring the dishes up quickly. But after finishing the first round, the princess still opened the menu again, making Maria rush to order more. The food was then brought and Khan wanted the princess to stand up and sing, but Maria grabbed it and Lane informed that the princess shouldn't be allowed to sing in this condition. Because previously when this incident happened, the princess had made dozens of people sit and listen to her sing for dozens of hours straight, and despite continuously stumbling while singing, the princess showed no signs of stopping. After that incident, 17 people were unconscious and 64 people had to be hospitalized for emergency treatment. The auditorium collapsed and took 2 months to rebuild. Afterwards, when Maria started singing the first song, Khan realized this wasn't like a karaoke bar used for stress relief at all. The princess then turned off the music because it wasn't good, so Maria had to change to another song. Maria sang a song about her dual gender and Khan understood that they would have to sing about their shame and accept the pressure put on them. Khan then understood and accepted to sit and listen. Eric's group heard the noise and intended to go knock on the door to rectify the situation, but everyone stopped them because they came here for entertainment, not to bother and cause trouble with others. Back to Khan, Maria had finished singing and he used the excuse of not knowing the local writing to avoid singing. So Lane had to sing. He drank a bottle of alcohol to release the pressure and ran up to sing about cats. But Khan couldn't consider himself safe because Maria signaled him to take the tambourine to use. He added accompaniment, and then suddenly after Lane finished singing, the princess discovered the scoring mechanism of karaoke. So she forced Pet to sing for a higher score than Lane's, or else she would throw it in the soup pot. As soon as she finished speaking, Maria had to call the receptionist to bring a pot of soup. The pressure increased, making Khan want to do something to help Pet. But if he let noise in, the score would be lowered, so now the only way was to pray for Pet to escape danger. But when singing, everyone noticed that Pet sang quite well, except it often made the mistake of getting too absorbed and reading out colloquial words that weren't in the lyrics, which would be counted as wrong lyrics. And then at the end, Pet had just thought it had sung very well when Khan and others all sympathized with Pet. The princess then requested to calculate the score, and it had to be at least 80 for Pet to live. When it reached 70, the score stopped, forcing Lane to throw a piece of meat into the 80 slot and trick the princess that the light had turned red at 80 so Pet had enough points. The princess couldn't see clearly so Khan had to run over to cover it. The piece of meat was about to fall so Maria had to shoot and break the TV to save Pet. At this time, everyone in Eric's group was drunk and starting to act crazy. Eric then had to go out to use the bathroom and shouted about wanting to sing. Khan passed by and heard but ignored it. Back with the group, Eric decided to take over to sing, but everyone kept snatching the remote control back and forth and started acting even crazier. Khan returned to the room at this time, knew hell was waiting in there so decided to leave and if asked, would just say he got lost. But just as he thought he had escaped hell pulled him back. The group then had to sit and endure the princess's torturous singing voice with no way to escape. Eric had just had the chance to sing when the others had all fallen asleep, but the reception informed that they were about to close. Not long after, the final ritual took place, which was rhinoceros-drawn chariot jousting, which was exactly as the name described. The princess and the minister now officially met and Maria couldn't stop crying, while Khan was disappointed because in the end, the ritual he thought was hope turned out to be nothing. Eric now also knew they had failed to prevent the wedding, and they also didn't know why the organization deliberately suspended them to make this wedding go smoothly. Therefore, Green Hair volunteered to investigate the organization. Red Hair then followed, but Yellow Hair stopped him for fear Red Hair would go fooling around again, but Eric ignored it and let Red Hair go. Eric then went down to find Khan himself, making Yellow Hair have to run after him. In the evening, the princess came to Khan's group to say goodbye. She thanked everyone for their support over time and Maria asked if the princess needed help. Khan would wholeheartedly help her, but she refused help from Khan and then left. The princess then went to the minister's room, and he showed her his stuffed animal collection. Khan at this time couldn't stop shaking his leg due to worry, but it was too late. As for the minister, he just wanted the princess to wear the cute outfits he had prepared for her, and the minister seemed still quite childish when he only liked to talk to the princess through the puppet in his hand instead of using his real voice to speak. Khan kept making a fuss because he was constantly worried that the minister would be a terrible person. But that was the princess's choice, and he had no right to interfere. Khan had begun to accept the truth, but thoughts about that minister kept appearing in his head. He repeatedly banged his head against the wall to stop the dark thoughts. But then suddenly the princess inside started to get angry and raised 3 strands of hair, causing the whole room to explode. Khan ran to see and found the minister lying with his buttocks up, begging for mercy. The minister's people then came and thought Khan was trying to assassinate a high-ranking official, so everyone had to carry the princess and clear the way for Khan to run. Eric was sitting dazed by the lake when suddenly Khan's group came and asked Eric to handle this place. A rain of arrows flew in and Eric managed to hide behind a tree in time. Eric then met Yellow Hair and Black Hair again. Both had heard Eric's secret confessions, making him embarrassed and run out to fight to forget. But when called an accomplice of the minister's assassin, Eric knew he had been set up by Khan again. Khan's group had escaped and Khan had asked why the princess had hit the minister. He came up with a bunch of reasons, but the final reason was because a nose hair of the minister was dangling, making her uncomfortable, so she hit him. Eric was now running with his face down and swore he wouldn't forgive Khan. The minister also swore to revenge the princess at all costs. Meanwhile, the rebel side was extremely pleased to know that the princess and the minister had cracked, and now war would break out. Green hair had been discovered and was found by some elite soldiers of the rebel side. Eric was being chased and had to hide up a tree. Police dogs had chased and found Eric's group. Suddenly a beam of light teleported all members of Eric's group away. Pet had heard the news and suddenly told the group not to be shocked but to prepare mentally. The group was then also teleported and Khan suddenly found himself back in the room. He heard Alma's voice again and she asked for his help again. He just remembered the previous incident when he woke up. He met Alma and knew she was the one who asked for his help. She asked him to save this world and he was a bit concerned because it was quite dangerous and could be fatal, but in return he would receive a favor from her. He asked for her name, but she only said it was a secret. However, she didn't force him to participate and he could return to the old world if he wanted. However, being asked by a beautiful girl made Khan hesitate and ponder whether to help or not. He met Pet again, and it informed him that this girl was the one who asked it to follow the group closely. Eric's group then woke up and Red Hair again abandoned the mission to go play, so he was scolded. Eric's group then went together and Lane and Maria were now on their way. Suddenly, they all found their way to Alma's room. She let Eric know that the name Alma was just an alias and her real name was still a mystery. She then informed the group about the ancient tribe with the ability to control magic, from which they built cities in the sky, but due to war everything had perished, and now war was about to happen again. Green Hair had heard everything from the organization and knew that the organization they were participating in wasn't good either because it was the side instigating the war. Eric had long thought he was in a justice organization. Alma said that she had tried to create a warrior for one side, Eric, and summoned another person, Khan, to give him power to balance the power between the two sides. But now that things had fallen apart, she decided to give power to everyone to fight and reclaim peace. The reason Eric was chosen was because of his slightly better qualities, which shocked Eric and gave Khan something to mock. Alma also immediately informed that below were magic weapons she prepared for them to choose to use. Khan had made his decision at this point, and when tempted by Alma, he still decided to stay here. Back down there, everyone saw the weapons placed in a large box with a lever, so everyone rushed to pull the lever. Khan sat pondering whether he was sure about his choice. If he went back now, he would live but would forever be a virgin, while staying meant he could die. He also regretted not thoroughly learning swordsmanship and martial arts back then. Everyone then tried their best but couldn't move the lever. The princess used both magical power and the power of raising a bunch of hair, but it still didn't work. Khan realized that inserting money into the slot and pulling the lever would work. So after that, the princess spent a lot of money to get the weapons she liked, and the leftovers were given to Eric's group to choose from. Eric's group was then sent back to the exact location where they had been teleported from. Green Hair intended to tell Eric something but didn't have time. When sent back, Eric wondered which side he should choose to fight for. Khan now had a proper answer for Alma, that he would stay, so he asked her to turn him into a man, but the person helping him was Lane, which didn't make him very happy. She then teleported the whole group back to their original position and told them if they needed anything, just ask Pet to call her. The next day, the group set out for battle, but had to duck their heads to avoid the enemy's bombing. Lane didn't expect the two sides to have mobilized such a large force. Khan thought they should quickly find the minister and explain that the incident that night was due to the rebels secretly planting that nose hair on the minister to trigger the princess's irritation. Suddenly Maria was shocked to meet her brother on the battlefield, so she decided to retreat. Maria had lost her fighting spirit, so now the princess would stand up to stop her country's people. But as soon as she stepped out to stop them, the princess's brother also appeared and said she shouldn't obstruct because this war was inevitable. The princess also lost her spirit, forcing the group to retreat again. Lane now proposed a plan to deal with the mastermind who started this, but as soon as they entered the battle, they were surrounded and Lane met his big brother, so they had to retreat again. Khan saw that everyone had lost their spirit, so he started shouting. Everyone now began to say regretful words as if they were about to die, so Khan wanted them to be quiet and not say anything. Not to be pessimistic here, because the slower they were, the sooner the rebel side's plan would succeed. They then went to a restaurant to have a meal to prepare for the battle, because after all, he need to eat to have strength. They then decided they must stop the war, and a little girl, when hearing Khan say that, made him promise that he must stop it. Khan then went outside and saw a black cat and thought his bad luck had begun. But here black cats were good omens, and what stuck to his hand afterwards was the real bad luck. He wiped it on the ground, but it became double bad luck. According to Lane, years ago, there was a great hero who won every battle. But because of bad luck like Khan just had, that person fell into the enemy's trap and lost 800 soldiers. Later, when investigating, that hero found a way to solve it. But he didn't believe it, and right after that, he almost got hit by a falling flower pot. He started to believe and asked how that hero solved it. Specifically, he needed water to wash his hands, and the person pouring water for him must be a pure woman, and Maria didn't meet that condition. A large drill then flew straight to Khan's place. He dodged it, but was then bitten by a poisonous spider on his back. He was then bitten and fell unconscious. Meanwhile, Eric had called the organization, and when he received an answer to stand by from them, Eric had lost faith in the organization and decided to leave this side. Suddenly Green Hair returned wounded. He had just been defeated by the organization's new generation robots. Although he had destroyed a few, he was also seriously injured and now was about to die. But suddenly Red Hair returned and cast a recovery spell to heal him completely. Everyone asked where Red Hair had been until now, and he lied that he went drinking, but Yellow Hair knew he had just gone to negotiate child support with his ex-wife, because his ex-wife was Yellow Hair's schoolmate, so she knew. Red Hair wondered how Yellow Hair knew his wife, while his wife studied at a girls' school. Yellow Hair now confessed that she was a girl, but everyone already knew. It's just that Yellow Hair tried to hide it, so they didn't have the heart to expose her. Only Eric didn't know this before and was shocked because he had been deceiving his fiancée by getting close to another girl. Khan now woke up after being detoxified by Alma, but his bad luck was still there, so he had to participate in the ritual that everyone had prepared for him. Specifically, he would be dropped into this giant water barrel by the princess. After that, Lane lights a fire and Khan will have to push the jar over and extinguish the fire, but Alma sees that time is running out, so she shoots to break the jar to help Khan, who doesn't know about this and just thinks he did it himself. Khan then asks Alma why she doesn't control the flying city while the wolf participates in the battle, but she is helpless because the technology here is too poor to control the entire city. Khan gives her headphones and a phone so she can combine it with the holy weapon. Who knows if it will be useful? The king's army and the minister's forces have now met and are preparing to engage in battle, while Khan's group is running frantically to intervene, but Khan is a bit exhausted and can't run anymore. Suddenly, the group is blocked by artificial warriors from the rebel organization. The commander of this group shows up and Khan doesn't understand why the other side looks like zombies. He recounts how his organization knows these are emotionless and cold-blooded warriors, but Khan doesn't pay much attention and only asks why he keeps chuckling before speaking. But he continues to chuckle and then orders the soldiers to be serious again. Khan and the whole group also get serious to prepare for battle. Lane charges forward while Maria and the princess fire from behind. The level of destruction from all three makes Khan feel like he doesn't need to join the battle and tire himself out. But after a while of fighting, Khan realizes that the enemy doesn't want to destroy the whole group. Just hold them back until the real war breaks out. But the enemy is still blocking in large numbers and soon after calls for reinforcements. Khan's group is pushed back, but at this moment Eric's group comes to support. The group has decided to split from the organization and will operate independently. They successfully coordinate and eliminate all the artificial warriors and the commander. Eric then meets Khan and both sides will continue to stand on the same battle line until the war ends. Khan accepts and repeatedly guesses Eric's words, making Eric a bit frustrated. They then get in the car and head straight to the battlefield. On the battlefield at this time, the soldiers of both sides have begun to charge and fight. But suddenly Khan stands up to announce and request that the battle stop because he and those here are all warriors chosen by the ancient tribe. No one believes it, so the princess shoots down some tanks to demonstrate. But the minister is not convinced enough, so Khan tells Alma to act. Alma then controls the entire city in the sky to fly over the heads of the soldiers of both sides. Everyone now believes Khan's group are people of the ancient tribe and are gods, so they turn and run away because they know fighting against gods will result in death. The minister, left alone by the soldiers, is extremely frustrated. The king's forces also intend to surge forward, but they also turn back and run away. The initial plan is done, and now Eric's side plans to kidnap the king and minister and force both to sign a peace treaty. The rebel organization now hears that the battle has failed and Eric has betrayed, but they are not daunted because now they activate the organization's secret weapon, which is to summon the final boss of the movie. It's a demon, but only the top part because the bottom part is a soft, plush monster, but very huge. Khan calls Alma for help, but she is also helpless in this case. Khan thinks that doing anything now is useless because they are no different from lice compared to that monster, but Eric and everyone still charge forward, so Khan tells them to aim at its feet. The 5 superheroes on the other side and the princess's group then charge forward and shout their moves loudly. To do what? Of course, to look cool. What else? Khan doesn't understand why everyone likes to be so flashy, only for it to be almost ineffective as the monster takes no damage. The monster starts to notice them and turns to stomp on the whole group. Missing the stomp, it then spits saliva to make it flow into a stream. But Khan now knows what he has to do. He turns his weapon into a loudspeaker and calls out to the monster. He asks it what the hell it's doing, just repeating one word, which is its name. Does it not know how to talk or what? Is its body big, but its brain as small as a grape, or what? Does it just let the rebels over there order it around like an animal? If it's already strong, then stand up and do what it wants to do. He continuously interrupts it and makes it apologize. It asks him what it needs to do to make amends, then he subsequently tames it and starts leading it to carry out his own plan. Alma appears and she reveals that Khan has a very high magical adaptation index. She had expected him to become a warrior when he came here, but he mostly solved all problems just with his own words. The princess knows full well that Alma is also surprised by Khan's abilities. Khan then goes to capture the minister's car and the king's car and brings them back to the group, and so the peace treaty is quickly established. Meanwhile, the masterminds of the rebels are starting to flee, but Eric and his team are there to deal with and capture a nest of them. The king then organizes a celebration that all the turmoil has passed. The coronation ceremony is also held soon. The ringleader has to wear a cane for life, the artificial warriors are sent to farm, and the fluffy monster is directed by Khan to live on an island. But in the end, Khan and Eric's groups still have to participate in one final battle. Khan's group rushed to support him but was blocked by Eric's group. Khan threw pet at Eric, but the blonde stood up to block so Khan and Eric could fight one-on-one. But Eric's technique is still superior, and now Eric is confident he can avenge his 2 children. But Maria stops it because Maria knows about Eric losing his 2 children below. Everyone is shocked to hear the truth now, but Maria has decided to completely abandon her old gender by giving her 2 children to Eric. Eric thinks transplantation is impossible, but Alma says she can do it. Everyone wonders why Alma researched it, but they probably will never understand the reason. Alma then transfers the 2 gens from Maria to Eric. Maria is now much more comfortable while Eric can now marry his fiancée. Khan sees that both sides no longer need to fight, but Eric wants Khan to appreciate the life Maria saved. He also thinks he's no longer a virgin because he's about to eat Alma. She told him to let go at this moment because she would come to his private room later, but as soon as he let go, she immediately thought about breaking the promise. Khan now knows he will return, so he says goodbye to everyone. Alma sent him back, but the princess wants him to come back so they can finish saying goodbye. He is brought back again, and the princess comes to punch him for daring to leave like that. He tells the princess not to worry because he will meet her again when she is 18 years old, so he gets another slap. But he still goes and tells her to try to become a good princess, and for Lane and Maria along with Pet to try to protect the princess well, and for Eric's group to protect this world in his place. Khan then returns and wakes up in his room. He thinks he just fell unconscious from the chair, but Alma's apology for breaking her promise on the screen and the stinging sensation from the princess's slap are real, so he knows he wasn't dreaming. He then puts away the games and decides to go outside to touch grass, and this is where the movie ends.